it was horses that brought us together. It really was.
Oh. Every horse is a little bit different,
They feel what you're feeling.
If your horse is calling out to you or whinnying to you or trying to get your attention and you're too busy looking at the phone, just like that child and parent relationship.
Feeding time would be a big question about, like, what do I do about my horse at feeding time, because blah, blah, you fill in the blanks. You know how horses get at feeding.
There's this incongruence that happens, and the horses, they feel it, and it's really strong.
If people look at horsemanship as an art form, they will feel and they will see beauty. And then that's going to guide and direct everything for horses.
What can we learn from horses when we put down our phones and tune in? Paula and Jack Curtis, a husband and wife duo, are the founders of the Art of the Horseman. They've been teaching and training since their teens, guided by the wisdom of extraordinary horses and humans alike, inspired by legendary horsemen like Ray Hunt, Buck Brannaman and Walter Zettel. The Art of the Horseman online horse fair is more than a platform. It's a movement, a space where inspirational trainers come together to honour the horse-human relationship. Paula and Jack believe that true horsemanship starts from within. So how can horses help us with self-growth and make us better people? Let's jump in and find out, shall we?
Paula, Jack, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh, thank you both so much for being here. I've got to ask you, the word teacher comes up a lot in your ethos and in your work. I want to take you both back to the first time that you realised you had a lot of lessons to learn from a horse.
Oh boy, I would say for me, it was as a youth. We had, in second grade, we got a horse farm, which was super exciting for me. And we had horses on the property, and therefore I had to help with feeding and those sorts of things. And I realized at that time that, boy, I had better learn how to handle the horses all by myself, which meant I had to learn more about them. And that's probably where it really started for me. So pretty early on.
Yeah. And for me, I remember it was our first family horse. So I had been taking school horse lessons and riding different horses. And then, of course, one thing leads to another, right? We start a lesson, and then pretty soon one day, maybe we get a horse. And so my parents asked me, they said, Jack, would you like to get a horse? I said, yeah, of course I would. So my trainer, who, a really special lady, she said, well, my neighbor next door, they have a horse for sale, and she's a really nice mare, and a quarter horse mare, but put together really nice. And I think you should go over and look at that mare. And so we did. And so then, and this, I should preface this by saying that we'd been looking for a family horse for probably 2 years, maybe a year, at least a year, maybe two. So finally, here she has one at her neighbor's. And so we went and we looked at it, and we bought her. But it turns out she was pretty green, actually really green. And so it was my first horse, my family's first horse, and she was a green mare. And I can remember one time my mom was putting a saddle on her, and at that point we would tie horses more than we do now. And she was putting a saddle on her, and all of a sudden she tightened up the girth, and the mare kicked double-barreled two legs back at me and my mom. And it scared us both bad, really bad. And then there happened to be a boarder at the barn that had a little more experience than we did. And so we spoke to him, and that got us going with this horse and sort of my path to my first horse and my first green horse all at the same time.
And how did you make that breakthrough with the horse that was double barreling you? Because that is terrifying, whether you're a child or a teenager or an adult, it doesn't matter. That prospect is always haunting, isn't it, when you're dealing with horses?
It is. And it's such a human thing that we first need to be almost humbled, or at least awake, that something has to happen for our eyes to open and for us to say, we need to become more aware, and I need to know more. I want to know more. And that's what it was. And so then we realized that you will make these mistakes, but the horse will tell you. And as long as we're perceptive enough and aware enough to listen, we can then choose a direction. And that was really the big thing. And there were other events that happened. And, of course, looking back at a lot of horses that I've worked with, I regret some of the approaches that I took. And if I could undo things that I did, I would. But I did learn from that. And it was part of the process and part of the journey.
And it's so important, isn't it, to be open to learning and to be open to make changes in the world of being an equestrian, because things are shifting all the time, and there seems to be a real movement at the moment, doesn't there, of sort of unlearning things from our childhood that have been passed down the generations. I know that, in my equestrian communities, people are all talking about, isn't it interesting that what our grandparents taught us or what our parents taught us or that childhood riding instructor, it just doesn't sit well with us now. And now we're sort of retraining ourselves and changing our horsemanship. Is that what you found at that particular time for both of you?
Yeah.
I would say most definitely. I went through myself. It was a journey, we had a horse farm, and of course I got knocked around by some horses and ponies and whatnot. Just as a kid, you do silly things and you get in trouble and you learn from it and that sort of thing.
And of course you bounce. So that is the time to do it, because you bounce and you don't break.
Right. Which is good, which is a very good thing. And as I progressed, I was fortunate enough that my parents brought in a lot of really high quality clinicians and trainers to our stable. And I was exposed to a lot, and we had a horse fair nearby that was quite a large horse fair. And there were some pretty remarkable clinicians that came in. And so I was just a sponge, as Jack was as well. I mean, we had the videos and watched everything, and I started being able to get a lot done with my horses. It was exciting. I had a horse that I was barrel racing, and I was able to ride him bridleless and do things with them that, were pretty cool. And tricks, rearing, laying down, bowing, all that stuff. And as a teenager, those are, of course, the things that are really extra cool. And then later in my teens, I got a thoroughbred, and he was younger. He wasn't started. And I progressed pretty well with him in my mind. And you know how it is when you're a teenager and you'd like the approval of others. And we had a clinician come in, and this young thoroughbred, and I wouldn't do this now, but I mean, he was like 4 or 5, and I was jumping him over large fences, like 4-foot plus fences, bridleless. And, he was one that I taught the tricks and all of that. And he would pin his ears, he'd kind of wring his tail. So I knew I needed to get a little help with that. But I also we had a clinician come in, and I wanted to show her what I could do because I was a teenager, and and I was probably impressing myself, which I shouldn't have been. But she essentially showed me in a very short interaction where we were all on the ground, directing our horses' attention and their focus to look at different obstacles or things in the arena, just at a standstill, just getting them to tip their focus and look. And my horse was doing it, and I thought I was fine. And she looked at me, and she kind of gave me a look like, oh no, it's not quite right. And she had a little bit of a scowl on her face. And then she came over, and, it's when you're all circled around. So she singled me out. She came over and she said, can I show you? And she took a hold of him, and she did a couple little things. And I wasn't super aware at the time of what she did, but she really got him to pay attention. And he all of a sudden perked up and looked at her. And then when she started directing his focus and asking him to look one direction or over his shoulder, the other direction, what happened was he invested himself in it. So his ears came up, his eyes got bright, and he actually looked. And she said, did you see that? And I said, yeah, I see it. And it looked good to me. And then I took the lead rope, and she asked me to do it. And I could see he just shut down. He closed up, and I asked him to look, and he looked physically. but he didn't look mentally. He wasn't looking with his whole being. And that was probably the epiphany moment for me where I went, oh, I am not, I'm training my horses, but I'm not actually communicating and formulating a relationship with them. And communication goes both ways. And I had not noticed, even though I had my horse doing all these, cool things, I had not actually noticed what his thoughts were about what I was doing with him. I was talking at him, but I wasn't communicating with him. And that was a big turning point for me. And I'm so grateful for that lesson.
Learning that it's the whole horse, which is the
Yeah.
mind. Do they understand? If they don't understand, we don't get firmer. So you speak Spanish and I speak English. If you don't understand me, I'm not going to yell at you. So the first thing was the mind, and that came around. All of a sudden, people said, we need to get good at this and understand and think more like a horse. And the body of the horse, that's always been something that people have been fixated on. And that's good. The body's important because it's the body that gets you there. But all these horse terms, it's all body. Most of this is body. And then at some point we realize there's a third component, and it's the energy or the life of the horse. And some, spirit, energy, life, these are all in the same same category, same realm. And so all of a sudden one day we realize I'm not affecting my horse's life. I'm talking at him and I'm getting his body to do it. But I don't have the whole horse. I don't have him willingly turning loose, flowing with me in harmony. And when this happens, and that's what happened when the instructor took the lead rope, that horse came alive and looked at you. And then when you took the rope, he kind of looked angular and he put his head down and put his ears back. And why? Well, because you'd been making him do things, but it wasn't the whole horse, mind, body, and life energy.
Oh, that is fascinating, isn't it? And I absolutely love that. And also, it's such an instinctive connection, isn't it, when we're talking about the spirit of the horse and the energy of the horse. We really have to tune into that and feel deeper than just asking and teaching and training our horses to do things. We have to have that connection. How would you say to people who feel like they may be asking their horses to do things and teaching their horses, but they're not truly listening, how would you encourage them to step into that instinctive way of feeling the spirit of the horse?
Yeah, and it starts with ourselves, being aware of oneself. So without that, nothing can happen. In fact, it'd be hard to progress with anything if we're not aware of ourselves. So the first step is expanding their power of observation. And even like you look at like the word like meditation, and it would be like to become familiar with, right? To learn and to know and to become familiar with. And so if I could get people aware of first themselves, then all of a sudden we're in the moment. And now they're seeing what's happening in front of them and what is in the now, and not coming to me and saying, oh, last week he ran off, and people will come and they're talking to me past, present, and future all at the same time. And it's like, you have to get into the moment of the horse. And so first, I would say get them aware of themselves. Second, let's slow down and observe us with the horse and feel, what is that horse feeling?
Yeah, and actually we're in the middle of, it won't be going on now, but we have a connected mind coaching program that we do. That's a real thorough program. And we're in the middle of launching it right now. But what we do from the very beginning is, like Jack was talking to, knowing yourself, but then knowing your horse and becoming a quiet observer of your horse. All good relationships are built on having good experiences together. And first, before you can have a good experience with someone or with your horse, you need to understand a whole lot about them. If there's someone, let's say a friend, and the last thing they want to do is go to movies, maybe that's just not their thing, and you drag them along to a movie, well, you're not going to have a great time, and that's not going to help build your relationship. So the same thing goes with your horse. Now, with horses, it can be pretty simple. So it might be involving you going and taking your horse out for a graze and observing him there for some people, it might start with just parking a chair outside your horse's paddock and just being, and learn. Every horse is a little bit different. There's some horses in the herd that are like the watchful horse that's always on the lookout. There's the other
Mm.
horse in the herd, maybe that's the real curious one. So if you watch your horse in a herd, you can learn a whole lot about their temperament and their personality and what drives them. And then when we learn what drives our horses, now we can start bringing that into the experience. So then from there, what we encourage people to do is bring novel objects out to your horse's pasture or into the setting and let them explore it, and then make note of how they explore it. Some horses like to use their mouth a lot. They're real oral. Others, they're careful, and maybe they'll graze closer to it, and then they'll stop, and then they'll maybe go away from it. And they prefer to approach and retreat and kind of take their time to get familiar with the situation. When we know these things, now when we're asking our horse to do something, we can say, okay, I know my horse prefers to approach new and novel things this way, and I'm going to bring that into my approach. So now I'm working with him in a way that makes sense to his being, to that particular horse's being.
Oh, that is lovely. I mean, how often are we as equestrians so short of time and we think, right, we've got to get to the stables, they need haying, they need feeding, they need exercising. But actually, it's so rare that we hear from a trainer or from a teacher that we need to prioritise time to just be with them. And that's not even grooming. We often hear, oh, make more time to play with your horse or to groom your horse, because that's important too. But actually, that's fascinating to me that you suggest just watching them in the herd, just watching them grazing. That is beautiful to see how they choose to spend their time when we're not racing around and dishing out dinners and, ticking off to-do lists on our schedules or exercise regimes that we need to meet. And that is such a beautiful way to get to know our horse and to actually relax with them and see them in a different space than we usually are. But so difficult, isn't it, when our lives are so stressful and busy? How do you actually get your customers and your clients, Paula and Jack, to listen to you when you say it is important to just watch and to just stand at the fence?
I don't know if they do. I mean, people do listen, but I think
Yeah.
they have to do what they need to do first, and do work. People need to do it their way first, and that's okay too. And then at some point they understand, yeah, I need to more blend with my horse, or be more like, to be harmonious with my horse. I can't just be tying him up and brushing him. People put him in cross ties and they curry him with a curry comb, and they think the horse likes it to a point. Well, could you do it untied? Could you do it with the horse just wanting to be with you? And could you take enough time to blend with your horse? So that's what it feels like to the horse. And so instead of it being a foreign thing that we walk into their environment and all of a sudden we have these expectations, which is reality, and that does happen, I need to have enough time to blend with my horse. And so my customers and my clients, they start to see that and they go, that's easy. That looks pretty easy. And then they want to do it too. And so pretty soon then they start to take more time when they need to take more time with their horse. But we can't really, I'll tell people to a point, but then there's a point where I say they're either they're not ready to hear it. There's a timing. There's, aspect to when you tell somebody something. And then there's also the point where I say, I have to let them do what they're going to do anyway for a while. And if they make a mistake, they'll be more apt to listen and come back with a question anyway. So I don't know if you have anything to add, clients, to get them
Yeah,
to.
I think, you have to be ready for it. And so therefore it's, for some people, when they're seeking and when they're asking the questions, that's when they can take the answer. And then once you start seeing the dividends and it starts paying results, and you start noticing, oh, wow, my horse is really eager waiting at the gate for me. That's different, because for some people that is very different. All of a sudden you start reflecting on, and we always encourage our students to do this, observe, remember, and compare. You start reflecting on, boy, what did I do in my last couple sessions that caused the change in my horse, because really it comes from us. And then when we see that, we go, okay, I'm going to do more of that because it's working.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I also explain to people that you only have so much time. And a lot of the time we want to work on what we want to work on. Like I want to work on sitting trot today because I saw a video last night on YouTube about how to sit better. And so I want to work on sitting trot. Well, what if you're in a hurry that day and your horse is really spooky and your horse isn't ready in that moment to do a sitting trot? That's not fair. So getting people to understand that sometimes plans are subject to change, and that might be okay, but then bite off a smaller, take a smaller piece of the puzzle. And that's what I like to tell people is think about it like this, is riding a horse, visualize yourself riding a horse and think of that like a big, beautiful puzzle. And it's not huge. It's not like 10,000 pieces. It's like hundreds of pieces, you know, but you can't work on each piece every time you're with your horse. It's just too much for the horse. It's not fair. But you might work on 1, 2, 3 pieces of your puzzle. And if you get it really solid, it'll be there for you again. And pretty soon it starts to look like a corner of the puzzle, but you start to see this picture. And over time, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we have to make sure that we work on what the horse needs us to work on that day first. And then our time will be so much more efficient that when people have less time, they'll get more done. Less is more sometimes.
And now I've got to ask the obvious question. We all love a husband and wife story as to how you met. Did horses bring you together? Seeing as you're so in sync, we can all hear that in the stories you're telling and your philosophies around horses. Was it horses that brought you together? And also, how did you find that way of working together and obviously being together as well?
I apparently picked on Jack on our school bus in middle school, which I wasn't aware of until later on.
Yeah. So it's good to bring up some emotion here. No, just kidding. I used to, at that point, I took the bus to school, and I was like the younger, is middle school. So that's a great age to take the bus to school. And I was the youngest on the bus, and I was like the last to be picked up, and there was never an open seat. And so my friends that would normally be my friend, like during like my neighbors, they were older than me. So on the bus, they were like, whatever, you're on your own, buddy, you know? And so I was always like searching for a seat to sit, and I'd go and I'd go to the back of the bus or whatever. I'd find a seat, and that Paula was there, and I was wearing a hat, and she happened to say something about my hat, and I was just like, I didn't like it. I was like, this person's mean. I'm not going to talk to her. Like, this went on for a while, like maybe a year or something. But then we were in what's called 4-H. So 4-H is different programs that we have in the U.S. for farming and other things as well. We were in 4-H.
Yeah.
So we would cross paths a lot. And then we were in the horse project in 4-H. And so now we were riding at the same events. And even, which is really interesting, my first horse show that I ever did, it was like a practice show. It was at my home barn where we boarded, and my trainer was the judge. And the only other person that I was riding against was Paula. It was my first show. It was her first show. Oh, what? I forgot about that. It was your first show. So our first horse show ever, and we were the only 2 people in the ring. And this was all again how we and this, I guess this was maybe earlier than even the school bus thing.
Yeah.
And so 2 classes, and my trainer was the judge, and Paula beat me both times. But it's okay. Again, and I was on the green horse I told you about too. I forgot about that. So I was on our first horse, the one that we talked about earlier. But so we kept crossing paths and riding together. Of course, when you ride with somebody or you do an activity with somebody, it's easier to become friends that way, or easier to establish a relationship, right? Because when you're both doing something that you like to do, it's just a nice feeling of flow. And Paula was always really good with horses, and that intrigued me as well. I'd watch Paula and go, wow, That's pretty cool. My
Oh.
horse isn't
I've
that.
never heard that.
Yes,
I mean,
it's
and
all
so,
coming out
yeah,
in the podcast.
you
Yeah.
Yes.
pick and pick somebody with horses that, you know, if you're gonna, you know, eventually marry somebody or have a relationship with somebody with horses, you know, it helps if they're really good with horses, because then you want to be as good as they are. And so then you work really hard. And I think maybe in some other areas with horses, maybe it was the same for you. Maybe I was good in
Yeah.
some areas and she's like, I might be more that way. But yeah, so that was how we met. Well, it was horses that brought us together. It really
Yeah.
was.
Oh, and wow, you couldn't have met any earlier as well in your life with horses, childhood sweethearts too. And it's so interesting what you say about you need to, if you're going to be with someone with horses, they need to be good with horses. Isn't it interesting? Because we always focus, whether you're, you know, a man or a woman and you're horsey, you're thinking, oh, I really hope my partner might like horses or might show an interest in horses or, you know, might come and join me at the stables or, you know, entertain my passion and my lifestyle. But actually that's fascinating, isn't it, to think actually about finding a horsey partner, and you need to be on the same wavelength in that regard. You can't have different ideologies about how to be with horses. You can't have different training techniques, because that could be a make or break or a giant clash, couldn't it, if actually you've got different ways of being with horses. So did you immediately know, the both of you, that you kind of had this deeper connection with horses and were on a different wavelength to, say, traditional competitors, shall we say, who do tell a horse what it might need to be doing rather than listen to the horse and ask the horse?
I would say we were pretty fortunate in the respect that the 4-H group that we were a part of had a very strong contingent of parents and youth that were very interested in natural horsemanship. And at the time, I mean, we had Ray Hunt came to our fairgrounds. I mean, we were exposed to just really, really phenomenal people at a super young age. And I mean, the list goes on and on. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Uh,
You looked like you were going to say something. Well, but it was just, so we were fortunate that we were the subset within our 4-H group that really put horsemanship first. And we went to horse fairs as a group and did, as a 4-H group, as the youth, and did demonstrations at them. You did demonstrations at like Pirelli events as a
Oh, wow.
young teenager with his horses. Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't know if there are others from our 4-H that did that, but we really grew up in, I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I reflect back, in just like this golden little bubble of being exposed to amazing people and being surrounded by other youth that were very much thinking along all the same wavelengths.
yeah,
For the most part, don't you think?
yeah, I do. I think that we were still in the age and the era of time where people took more time, like parents took more time, like the parents were part of the meeting and in the meeting. And now parents are so busy, or they're in their car texting or on their phone, and you can be right next to your horse. You can be right next to your horse or right next to somebody you love, but not be there, because you're here. Your mind and your being is in this thing that you're looking at, this device in that moment. And back then, the parents, they all pitched in. So the kids think, my parents really care for us. They really love us because they're willing to spend so much time. And it's actually, I think about this with horses as well. Now, they don't look at it quite that way. We just feel really familiar to them and we feel good to them. But again, it's that time. And that's that one thing that you can't take back. But that's the thing that we really helped us to grow. And I think we were we grew up in an area where there were many different breeds of horses and all the exotic breeds. You know, if a new exotic breed came around, eventually it would end up in our area. So it was I would say we lived in an eclectic sort of environment. And I know that I spent a lot of time doing different disciplines and even showing, but I knew it's more than a costume. What I want is more than the hat that I put on and the saddle that I ride in. I knew it was me, and I want something more and deeper with the horse. And I couldn't really describe that, but that's what it was. And that's what drove us. And all of a sudden we didn't care anymore. Paula barrel raced in an English saddle. Normally it'd be Western and all these things that people worry about and say, well, that's not proper. All these things. And you realize you're like, the horse doesn't care about these things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you started to get real. And we said, I've got to be able to learn this whole horse and learn myself, like really learn it, and live it. You don't just learn it, you have to live it. And so luckily we were very, very blessed and fortunate that we grew up in that environment.
And that's so interesting what you've pointed out, and actually something that I hadn't thought about. And yet it's something I think about in every other aspect of life. So, often you'll see now mums and dads out and about and the child is pointing at an animal in a field, and then the parent just gives them an iPad and just shuts down the question. Or they're walking along with, as you say, with a pram, and they're juggling their phones and the attention is on the device. And you talking about having interactive parents back in the day in the stable yard and at the riding school, oh my goodness, that brings flashbacks to me of when I was proudly trotting my riding school pony around the arena, and I'd look through the glass and there would be my mum, clapping and cheering me on, smiling at me, and that real feel of pride and achievement that there was my parent watching me ride. And this week I was riding particularly well, and wow, what a feeling. And that connection, as you say, to your parent, to your horse in that moment. And I can't imagine the heartbreak, actually, to be that child now who looks up in that window and sees their parent more interested in their phone, and the devastation that child must feel, that disconnect that the child must feel. And actually, I want to ask the parents that are listening to this episode, when you go to your child's riding school, when you go to watch your child ride in an arena, are you really watching your child, or are you on your phone? Because I'm wondering now if the majority would say, I'm on my phone, I'm on WhatsApp, I'm texting, I'm on social media, and actually how worrying and how sad and how depressing that is in our current society, and the damage that is being done without really knowing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine a parent that's watching their little daughter trot for the first time through the window, and the daughter's so excited like you were, and now the mom smiled, and you feel some of the feeling that your child's feeling. See, but you feel it, you can see it, and you're it's almost like you're with them, riding with them.
Yeah.
The phone, they look up, they glance, and they look back down. They never got to feel that. They never got that joy, that rush of, oh my gosh, they're so happy. It's distracted. But it's a great lesson for people with their horse as well, is that if you're not in the now or in the present with your horse, it's the same thing. You're missing what the horse is feeling. And we talk about in horsemanship using feel. And what is feel? And it's just a small word with a big meaning. But to feel something, we have to be there, present in the moment. And it's whether it's kids or horses or anything. But we all have to work on it, because, and it sounds like we must be really good at these things, right? Like we should be really, we're not. I slip and I catch myself, and I'll slip, and it'll be 3 days later I catch myself slipping. I go, uh-oh. So it's human. But
totally. I'm saying this as someone who, is not yet a mum, but totally working in broadcasting. My phone distracts me all the time. Ping, 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 ring, 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 emails, social media. What a huge distraction. And I've had to watch myself, going to the yard to sort my own horses. There was a time when I thought, I am so enmeshed in work that I'm doing the hay, I'm dishing out the hay whilst also scrolling to see what work have said about something or other. Or juggling an email whilst mixing up the dinners. And so now I try and leave my phone in the car or on a fence post or somewhere where a miniature horse is not going to knock it into the mud. And so that I am totally present, and so that actually, you know, even with the best intentions, we can all say, oh, I'm going to be fully present, but then we hear that buzz or we see that flash of a notification, and then you still end up checking your phone. So just, I find keeping it well away for that hour in the morning and the hour in the evening that I'm with the horses means that I can't even feel that temptation to check my texts or to see what's happening on social media. Do you guys broach this subject? Do you guys try and encourage people to switch off from smartphones now?
In lessons, yeah. I mean, we try to. It taking it a little bit further, not only is it distracting, there's a conditioned response, hormonal chemical release of emotion when you hear the dinging or the ringing or the buzzing or whatever our phones do.
Yeah.
Think about a horse. Think about a horse. It's feeding time. They're stressed because they've been in all night. They hear the grain pouring into the grain pans. They hear the clanking of the stall doors opening and closing, whinnying. This is all auditory, conditioned. Every morning, the horse hears this. They get excited. They get really, really excited. They get their grain. The grain pours in. And people wonder, why is feeding time such a stressful thing? Well, it's a conditioned response. So all these things, the noises and the smells and everything, the energy of the barn all together. And it's not even just distracting with getting back to the phone from an emotional level. And so all of a sudden you might be in a great mood. And then you get this text and you look at your phone and it might be a text you don't want to get, or it might be from a person that you weren't whatever. And all of a sudden, how do you feel? But what I think about this because it helps me think and feel more like a horse. And so something to think about is that perhaps, and I think the further I go with horses, the more I start to realize I really am more like my horse than I thought. In the beginning, I thought I thought I'm a person and they're a horse. But then you start to realize emotionally, we're emotional beings, that I'm so much more like my horse than I ever thought.
Yeah. And something, just taking that to another level, if you're with your horse and everything, the feel between you is good. And horses, they read our emotions and our energy, and they're very tuned in. And if you're feeling one way and then your phone causes you to feel a different way, but then you're trying to work with your horse the same way that you were originally, there's this incongruence that happens. And the horses, they feel it, and it's really strong, and it's very, very noticeable for them. And so for them to have to make sense of that becomes problematic, because how can they, there's nothing in the environment that changed. They aren't seeing anything that would ordinarily affect their other herd mates. And so all of a sudden you shifted. Now you've become unpredictable because you've changed in relationship to the environment without the environment changing you. And for the horse, now they're going to start to be a little off around you, or just maybe watching you. You know how you watch somebody with a little sideways eye? You're just, I'm going to keep an eye on that, because I can't quite expect what they're going to be like in the next moment.
They feel what you're feeling. If you're present and there in the moment, you can feel what they're feeling. And it's this no different than the way people are with their friends or their spouses or their dogs. And you can look at somebody right away and go, whoa, something's wrong. Or so we know that we can feel energy. And when we ride, one of the first lessons we learn when we ride a horse is relax, don't squeeze, because the horse can feel you. And people will say the horse knows what you're thinking. People used to tell me that, and it's like, yeah, because they're animals of feeling. So much feeling goes on. How do they feel around you? And vice versa. How do we feel around our horse?
Oh, that is fascinating. And also thinking about the phones as well as all the things that you've both just mentioned. And also when you're looking down at that phone, if your horse is calling out to you or whinnying to you or trying to get your attention and you're too busy looking at the phone, just like that child and parent relationship, you'll feel that disconnect. Your horse will feel that too. If you're not acknowledging your horse, or just thinking about my mare who greets me every time I turn up at the fence, which is so sweet. She's probably asking for her dinner, but I like to think she's saying hello. And to think if I was looking down at my phone, we would then miss out on that interaction where I say hello back and then go and give her a scratch and have that really meaningful moment that hopefully means as much to her as it does to me in my normal daily life. And how sad as well that these devices are becoming such a draw that are pulling us away from the life that is happening in front of us with our families, friends, and our horses. It just seems like such a problem, and something that I hope can turn around, because I don't like the direction it's going in right now. But absolutely fascinating what you're both saying. I've got to ask you, the art of the horseman, where did the name and the inspiration come from, and why did you choose your business to be called the art of the horseman?
Well, Jack came up with the name.
She did all the work. I just came up with the name. So that's the truth. Yeah.
So we were exposed. Throughout our lives, we've ridden dressage and hunter jumper stuff and gymkhana and the natural horsemanship, and we've always been drawn to those people that when you watch them and their horse together, art has a feel. It's feel. So art has a feel, and there's and the feel is aesthetic. We can see it. It's energetic. We can feel it. There's a lot that the idea of art encompasses, and it's art should be beautiful, right? In the end, it should be beautiful, and that's really the heart of it. Is there should be beauty in our horsemanship.
If people look at horsemanship as an art form, they will feel and they will see beauty. And then that's going to guide and direct everything for horses. And so it should get to a point where, and it's getting, I don't know if it's getting better, but
it is.
We see things in the horse world that aren't so beautiful. And even a non-horse person sees these things and they'll go, that's not right. That doesn't look right. And then you ask the question, well, why do people do it? And so if is it artistic? Does it look good? Because that might really direct people. And so we look at horsemanship as an art form. So rather than looking at it as, a means to say win a ribbon or a means to go over something jumping, what if we look at it like an art form? And what's fascinating, it's almost like if we have one horse, and it's almost like giving two people a blank canvas. And you might even show them and you say, paint a picture of that tree over there. And so there's two people and it's a tree, but both of their trees are different and they have their own, it's still a tree and it's beautiful, but their own flair. And that's the difference with art as well, is that when somebody's really good at art, they put on their own flair, their own technique and their own style. And even martial arts, interestingly enough, I found out, martial arts at a high level, the instructor wants the student to start to put on some of their own style, which I find super fascinating. So when it's artistic, it's original. And that was why we picked the name.
And where does art come from?
Yeah.
If you ask any artist, it comes from here. It comes from our heart. And so if people are coming from their heart when they're creating their art with their horse, it naturally, it all goes together.
It does. The people generally do what they think is best, usually, like with their horse, or they do what somebody told them to do, and that's what they think is best. But then they need to be able to like observe and remember and compare and look at the horse and say, now, is this good? Should we do more of this? What does my horse need? And then what's interesting about working with horses is it varies from day to day. It's almost like I don't have the same horse every day. Things are flexible. Nothing's set in stone. Everything varies so much from day to day with my horse. And so again, every day I'm starting with observation and starting from scratch. And it's like I'm and that's part of this as well, is if I start tomorrow, if I go out tomorrow and I get my horse and I start the horse where I left off today, that's not fair. It won't be artistic. It won't look good. He's not ready. He's not flexible. The mind, the energy, and the body aren't ready. And so it can't be beautiful. And so anyway, it's interesting. And something else about art is there's flow. If something is artistic, and we can get the same thing like mountain biking or with our horse, when we're in a state of feel or flow. And I call that a flow state. And a flow state brings you to the moment again. But that flow state is what the horse is looking for as well. And when things flow and it feels good and you're in the moment, that's when you've looked at your watch or your phone and you go, oh my gosh, that was 2 hours. It went by like that. But anyway, all of this goes back to like the horse, and the horse is this beautiful creature. And so now we're able to influence this. And so let's do this. Let's work with the horse, and let's make a better world for horses and people. But let's not worry about costume and clicks and style and these little things. Let's get back to the horse and art of the horseman and all of that had to do with the big picture.
Yeah. We, from learning, so we have an online horse fair that brings together, depending on the year, between upwards of 40 to 60 horse trainers and veterinarians, body workers, mindset coaches for humans, farriers or barefoot hoof trimmers. So we bring together professionals that all have that same heart-centered horse-first approach, where we all believe that we are, putting the horse at the forefront, and we care. And it doesn't mean they're all perfect, and it doesn't mean that, I make mistakes still, but it's all people that are driving the horse industry in a direction that is good for people. Because let's not forget, people, there's been a lot of people that have been knocked around by professionals that have taken advantage of them. And I think that's happening less and less now. And then horses too, where they're just the means to the ribbon. And so we're bringing these professionals into a place where the public, anybody who would like to come, tickets are free you can watch for 2 days, or you can buy lifetime access if you'd like, but it's a place to come and learn and see what resonates with you, with where you're at on your journey right now. And that's something that is really important to us as well, because both of us, as you learn and grow, your focus areas change, the way you approach things changes. You're always modifying, because if you're learning, right, you're going to be changing as an individual. And so there's going to be different people that resonate with you, with where you're at on your journey right now. And I think as long as they're people that are putting the horse first, we are now creating more and more of a ripple effect across the industry, where it puts it in the right direction. And that was our goal with it.
Wow. And I'm wondering, for those thinking, we live in such an insular society now, don't we? Kind of everyone is more closed off. How did you go about finding your heart-centered tribe, if you like? These professionals that are all reading from the same hymn sheet and that have the same belief systems as you. How did you find your people?
It's gotten easier as our community's grown, because we get more and more recommendations from the community itself, which really helps. It's been an evolution, and then there's been, some people that we'll have on board, and then maybe they're not as good of a fit. And so we know that for, years moving forward, that they're not a good fit, and they may have been recommended. But as we start to get more and more community recommendations, you start to see some trends. And then when we first started, it's been 7 years now. When we first started, not everybody had websites or videos
Mm.
out. Now there's so many more people, especially after 2020, that are
Yeah.
putting out content. So then it's a lot easier to go and see if that's the type of approach that resonates with
Mm.
us.
And what are your clients coming to you for, the both of you, Paula and Jack? What do people really need right now in the equestrian world? What are they seeking from you, do you think?
Yeah, well, and and even like the type of client that I get is everything. And I
Mm.
don't mind a backyard horse person or a Grand Prix trainer or whatever. We get a variety of people. And what's interesting is really, as people, that we're looking for the same things. We're really looking for
Mm.
harmony with our horse, and how do we get more of that? And people know they want that, and they know they need to get that. And so um,
Yeah, I think, what kind of brought this on for me, and I was the one that kind of came up with the idea of doing the horse fair and whatnot, was we had a boarding and training facility. We were going to a lot of eventing shows,
yeah,
as well as hunter jumper shows, and then sprinkling dressage shows in there.
right.
So it was a lot of competition. And I had a bad accident. I was on a young horse and I bent it around, and and she was bucking, and I bent her around, and I thought I'm going to just get off. There was a big steep bank into a creek that was quite overflowing because we had had a lot of rain,
Mm.
and I kept her bent around. It was completely my fault, but got knocked to the ground and got pretty severely injured. And so after that, it was like
Mm.
this moment of reflection where, we're going and we're showing, and even with competing with our clients, we always put the relationship in the horse first. So it wasn't all about the ribbon. And those
Mm.
were the type of people that we attracted. And, we were both
Yeah.
going and traveling and teaching clinics and doing those sorts of things as well. And after that, it was a reflection of what am I really doing, and what's the mark I want to leave in this world? Because you hit a point where you're like, boy, I want to make a difference. And especially after something like that happens. And I had
Mm.
2 young children, and I thought, I want to be a good mom as well. And it just came about that the idea of the online horse fair seemed to strike the chord. And so since then, what we did is we moved. This was 4 years ago, from Wisconsin to Tennessee here in the U.S., and we live pretty rurally, and we moved to an area where we can do a lot of trail riding and get out with our horses, and our kids don't have to spend the weekends at horse shows or at clinics with us. They
Mm.
can, be here on the farm. And uh, so therefore, because we moved, the clientele changed a little bit, because again, we're more
Mm.
rural. We're surrounded by a lot of parks and trails and that sort of thing. And so uh, because I'm doing the horse fair for the last 7 years, I haven't been doing much teaching at all. Because as you know, when you start doing something like a podcast or this, I mean, it's very, very intense and very time consuming. Whereas Jack's doing a lot more, teaching and traveling and things like that. So uh, the clientele, although it's changed, the interesting part is the and we do a lot of coaching online. So I mean, we still teach lessons and that sort of thing, or I do,
Mm.
over like this sort of format.
Yeah.
But it's horses and people, and that mix doesn't change.
Yeah.
So although the costume and the outfits and the
Yeah.
end goal of what they're going to do is slightly different, really
Mm.
what it comes down to is, how can I show up as my best self for my horse, and do the best I can for my horse. And
Mm.
because Jack and I have always been lifelong learners, we're right there with everybody probably that's listening to this podcast. we're always trying to learn, and there's new science that comes out that's so fascinating about horses and their relationships and how their brains work and how the nervous system works. And it just adds layers of depth to what you're doing and how you're helping people. And some people are ready for that depth and it really helps them on their journey. And other times when you're working with somebody and you're really excited about the things that you're learning and you've got all this depth, but they're not ready, well, then you just adjust your approach and your teaching to what they need right now. Just like you do with your horse. Who are they showing up as today? And now I'm going to adjust my presentation and my approach to help with them with where they're at right now.
Yeah. And getting back to sort of your question, it's like what the horse really needs is they really need that person, like you said, to be the best person that they could be. And how do I get the owners, my clients, to understand that? I can't. I mean, I can tell people, but I can't make you understand. It's got to come from that, from you, from within. And that's the big thing. And it's really funny because, and I get videos, I'll get videos from people all over the world at different levels. And it's really the same few questions that we get. Doesn't matter what location, and it doesn't matter what level of rider or person. We seem to get the same questions, and it's horse-human relationship interaction. And I mean, we've seen it so much now. And the part for me that's frustrating is I see what people should do, but I can't make them do it. And that's the part that I have to relax about. And I have relaxed a lot over time. It's just like that person, when they're ready, hopefully they'll do it. But
and you
so it's interesting.
It's the same questions, Jack. What sort of questions are you getting?
Yeah. So one would be like at feeding time. So feeding time would be a big question about like, what do I do about my horse at feeding time? Because blah, blah, you fill in the blanks. You know how horses get at feeding. Another one would be, we get a lot of like questions with like leading, pushiness, spatial questions. A spatial, my horse is pushy. And it's because we've conditioned the horse to come in close and snuggle with us because we let them settle and halt and rest. And we brush them and we feed them. And so I have to explain to people, hey, balance. In horsemanship, we have field timing balance. You've got to have spatial balance. So we get a lot of spatial questions. Another one is herd bound, buddy sour.
Yes.
Buddy, I like to call it buddy attachment. They should have called it buddy attachment syndrome, but I think that's a lot to say.
Or behind the leg.
Behind the leg.
What
do I do? Yeah.
Yes.
But it comes down to lack of harmony or connection, where the person, the human, we feel, dang it, I'm not connected with my horse. The questions we get it's always when mentally that horse is in another, mentally, emotionally, and maybe physically, if it's bolting home to the barn, it's in another place. And all of the questions, they're all related to why is my horse not connecting with me? That's the answer. And if we look at that, that's how we get good with horses.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. And before we round up the episode, Paula and Jack, we've talked a lot in this episode about connection and about being present and about putting down our phones. But with your online fair and with your online platform, how important is it in this very insular world we now live in to have an online equestrian community of like-minded people, do you think?
Well, can I just start and then would you go second on that one? Something to think about is this. When you're with your horse, you should be in a feel or a flow state in the moment. That's the only place to be that's fair. That's what's right. When it comes to learning, analytical thought, step-by-step learning, pictures, visualization's huge. If the mind sees it, the mind thinks it's done it. Now, the body's different, but that's the analytical side. That's to be done away from the horse. That's the online. That's the learning. That's our self-betterment, self-education. And so to me, what's important about it is that people have, it's just like it's the phone thing. It's the technology thing. When you're with your horse, you're in nature, be in the moment, enjoy it, leave it alone. When you go home and you're winding down and you want to think, now let's open up the door and get into the technology state.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's helpful for people because sometimes, you can be the only one at your barn who is practicing a more horsemanship based approach, heart-centered approach with your horse. And it's, and I think this is answering your question from a slightly different angle, where it's very helpful for those people to be able to go, oh, wow, look at all of these people that are here learning with me. Look at all of these trainers who are here teaching and also learning as well. And it makes you feel not as alone if you're in a situation where you're at a barn where maybe that's not, first and foremost in most people's minds.
Paula and Jack, it has been amazing having you on Curious Equestrian. Thank you so much for letting us into your world for an hour. You are going to hang about and answer some listener questions in our behind the scenes membership zone in just a moment. But before that, for those listening who think, oh, I need a piece of Paula and Jack, I need the art of the horseman in my life, where can they find you?
Well, if you go to artofthehorseman.com, you'll be able to sign up for a free ticket to the online horse fair and watch the next screening of it, which is going to be May 31st to June 1st. And you can also visit becauseofthehorse.net, where you can learn more about that's actually where we host the fair, and you can get free tickets there as well. But I think Art of the Horseman, and it's HORSEMAN. We did man versus men because man encompasses man and woman.
Yes.
So it's artofthehorseman.com or becauseofthehorse.net, and you can find out more about us there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
You got it.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram @Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.